Hello, it's Philip Taylor speaking. This morning I'm looking at a book from Edward Elgar. I'm from Richmond Green Chambers in London. This book has come to us and it's quite an interesting book. It's involved with international law and migration, an area which we think is of great importance at the moment, especially on the current political agenda in 2014. The book itself is called Research Handbook on International Law and Migration. It's this book here. It's quite a heavy book. It's from Edward Elgar, which is a family business in international publishing. That's the spine and that's the back. You can see this is part of their series, Research Handbooks in International Law. It's been edited by two people. I hope I pronounced their names correctly. It's Vincent Chetail and Celine Bauloz, and they're graduate members of the, they're members of the Institute, the Graduate Institute of International and Development Studies in Switzerland. This is the book itself. I'll start at the back. There's actually a very detailed index at the back, which is very helpful. Then what you've got is a slightly different approach here with as it's a research handbook. You've got paragraph numbering at the side and a lot of footnotes at the bottom. Very helpful indeed. You can see on almost every page there's a lot of actually quite detailed footnotes and some very useful conclusions which are arrived at in the various chapter headings. Some of the footnotes are rather long, and that can be a little bit dispiriting, I think, even to academic students who are very used to it. But sometimes that can be a problem. That's actually the front part of it, and you can see here that's the Research Handbook series, which gives you an idea of what they actually are producing. Then you've got contents itself all the way through, with a list of the contributors, of which there are a large number. I can't go through all of the names, obviously, but there are a very large number of people involved. And then you move into the book itself. But as you see, even at the beginning, you've got a lot of detailed footnotes. So that can have a little bit of an effect when you're reading the book. But this is actually an academic book and very much part of what Edward Elgar are producing for us in the academic community. Now, my wife and I have given this a review. My wife Elizabeth and I have written a review and given it the current title of The Complex and Multifaceted Issue of Migration, Exhaustively Researched. And as I said at the beginning, migration law is emerging at the moment, apart from being extremely controversial and emotive, because it has a big political agenda of its own, both within and outside the European Union. It is an issue which is moving ahead quite rapidly at the moment within legal circles. And this is what we say anyway about the handbook. Vincent Chetail and Celine Bauloz from the Graduate Institute of International and Development Studies in Switzerland have produced a well-needed critical examination of migration and international law at a time when the issue is climbing to the top of the political agenda. Recently been published by Edward Elgar, as I've indicated, and the book examines the topic from the perspective of international law. And there's no simple task involved here, of course, as the issue of migration involves a large number of facets encompassing both civil and criminal matters, from human rights to migrants to state sovereignty, to human trafficking, to refugees and to displacement. And we all know trafficking in particular is an important international agenda item at the moment. Refugees have been with us for many, many years, and it's one of those problems that will remain until we start having a much more cogent international policy. But at least we've got things like this handbook to help us. This book, we say, offers an outstanding collection of learned essays from over 30 expert contributors, including the two editors, from top universities, from government bodies and institutions worldwide. Together, they present a selection of current research on key issues pertaining to migration, namely law, theory and policy. There are, of course, as said, other books available, and it's with a view to offering a range of perspectives on this continually expanding area of law that has attracted the interest, certainly of scholars and policymakers, as well as practitioners. And as the co-editor Vincent Chetail mentions, in the introduction, quote, "Migration has become one of the highest priorities on the international agenda." We concur with that, and in fact it's quite clear that that's what's happening, and it's going to be interesting to see how the debate develops in the next decade. The book's divided logically into 5 parts. Part 1 focuses on state sovereignty in times of globalization, covering, among other things, security, terrorism, smuggling and trafficking of human beings. Part 2 examines such issues as detention of migrants, diplomatic protection and consular assistance of migrants, plus citizenship, nationality and statelessness. That last one is becoming again very important just at the moment, with possible measures that some member states are looking at within the EU, because we have always had relatively small numbers of stateless people in the past, but that could grow if policies change. In fact, the difficulty being someone arrives in this country, we don't know who he or she is, and therefore it's decided they become stateless, and that's a dreadful state of affairs if you think about it, for anyone to actually be put into. Anyway, that's a matter for politics rather than the law. The emphasis therefore, moving on into part 2, is on the economic issues of migration, particularly within the EU, whilst parts 4 and 5 contain at least 10 essays on the various issues pertaining to refugees, internationally displaced persons and the new challenges of forced migration. And again, as I say, refugee policy has been with us a long time, and I think we're still looking for a lot of the answers, frankly. Let me then move on to say that in this volume, which is round about 700 pages, there's much food for thought for both the researcher and an almost endless supply of valuable references in the copious footnoting which is throughout. What a time saver it is if you're doing this sort of research. Additionally, there's a detailed index, and in fact I like the index because it's got a lot in it. And it's basically about 23 pages, which is right at the back. Some indexes tend to be very small and just a little bit sort of had to do it at the end of the book, as it were, whereas this one is actually very much part what we have in the book itself. So for graduate students to seasoned international practitioners, anyone involved in the often extremely difficult human rights issues generated by migration will appreciate the book's practical as well as scholarly approach to this sensitive, diverse and increasingly complex area of law. The book therefore makes an important contribution, in our view, to current literature on the subject, and it's not going to go away, just remember that. So it's something you'll find very helpful, I think, if you get this book. The publication date is cited at 2014, and I've recorded this in May 2014. This is the book again, just to remind you, the back of it, the side. It's a heavy book for 700 pages. It's got a hard cover effectively, but do note again there's a lot of footnotes in here, which, as I say, they sometimes can be a little bit daunting, but the beauty of a lot of this work from Elgar is there's just it's heavy in all senses. It's a heavy book, but it's heavy in all senses of the content as well, and I think it's a great contribution to what we're doing at the moment. I'd like to thank all the people at Elgar and of course the editors and the contributors. It's well worthwhile having this if you're doing research or doing higher education studies. So thank you all very much indeed for this contribution to an important and continuing subject. Bye-bye.